Hello, fellow parents and educators. Thank you for joining me at Education Evolution, where we are disrupting the status quo in today's learning models. We talk about present-day education, what's broken, who's fixing it, and how. I'm Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your host and founder of Education Evolution and the Microschool Coalition, where we are fiercely committed to changing the narrative, to reimagining the education landscape and creating learning that serves all children and prepares them to thrive. Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining Education Evolution today. You and your work is amazing. So for my listeners, Susan is the school leader at University High School, which is a school within a school in Tolleson High School. Susan, your smaller school's like top ranking in Arizona, aspirational. Your video of your kids are saying things like family and caring and all these things about accountability, but just empowerment. Tell our listeners about this amazing place.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about University High School. It actually started as a program about 15 years ago as like a magnet opportunity for our school district. Tolleson Union High School District is part of the Maricopa County. It's part of the that sort of suburban but still very much connected to City of Phoenix kind of environment. Our school district's at 60% free and reduced lunch. And so we've just got kids who've got all kinds of really interesting challenges in their life, but they are fantastic families and a fantastic community. And about 15 years ago, with all of the boom that was going on and building schools very quickly, and then the recession hit almost as quickly as they built the schools. And so there was this real desire by the superintendent at the time, Dr. Flores, who really wanted to build an idea for the community that our students should reach and attain college. And the fabulous film that was definitely a major part of my life while I was in college, Stand and Deliver, about Jaime Escalante, and the idea that students will rise to your expectations. And so he took that model, actually visited Garfield High School in East LA, and came back and said, let's build a magnet program because we might have 5 or 6 kids at any given campus that want to take AP physics, let's say, but not enough to make a whole course. And so they started to reach out to students who were interested in this idea of a real, highly rigorous program, but really very much connected to the idea that anybody could do this work. The door was very wide. You didn't have to have a particular GPA or pass any entrance exams. It was just about ganas, desire, as Jaime Escalante would say. And all the students had to do to be part of the program was sign a contract and say, I will take the AP Lit test my senior year, and I will take the AP Calculus test my senior year. You didn't get to say, well, I'm not really a math student. If you decide to come to University High as a magnet program, you were going to do math because we know that our brains can do anything. For some, it's just maybe a little more difficult, but you learn that. And it was really long before Carolyn Dweck published her work with Growth Mindset, it was really functioning from that perspective of, adversity makes us stronger, and our brains grow when we're challenged. And so it started off with just basically 2 teachers and 1 administrator, and they just reached out to students, and they came, and they had kids who couldn't do long division. They had kids who were at 2 grades lower than their reading level. But those kids worked really, really hard, and they all took the AP exams their senior year. And a number of them passed with high scores, with a 5, which is a perfect score. And it just continued to grow from there. And now we are 15 years later, and we've now been our own school with our own school ID number for the last 10 years. So that means, like when you look at U.S. News and World Report, we've been ranked in the top 50 ever since we became our own school. One year we were ranked 8th. One year we're ranked 20th. And it really is because a lot of that data comes from the AP College Board scoring system. But what's now happened is we have a school of about 500 students. We serve our community. We're not reaching outside of our community bounds and trying to cherry pick in a particular clientele of kid. It really is a representation of all of the students in our district who are just choosing a really particular kind of academic program, because here's the really best news about University High. What it did is exactly what Jaime Escalante said. Students will rise to your expectations. And guess what happened? All of our schools in our district, all of our comprehensive high schools have all of the AP programming now that we have. So it's very exciting to say, I'm proud to stand next to all of my sister schools and say, you can go to college from any one of our high schools. But you just pick University High because of what you sort of indicated at the beginning is it's a very unique program. It's built in a very strong family, familia, environment. And you can't really disappear as a teacher or as a student when you come to University High School. And I liken it to CrossFit in the sense, you can, certainly no one goes to CrossFit because they want to lose a couple pounds because they want to go, in that reunion with the, dress size smaller. They pick CrossFit because they want to know what they're made of. Because when you go into CrossFit, you don't get to say, well, I don't do squats. No, well, you're going to do squats today. You may not do them to the level that you think you want to do them, but you will work hard and get to that level. And that's really what the foundation of the rigor of University High School is sort of based on. And then, of course, growth mindset and grit and all those other things that we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the next few moments we have together.
Wow, this is amazing. How do you take eighth graders and say, not only are you going to get to college, you're going to complete college if you'll do these 4 years of high school? What's the magic that you get kids that are really kind of just wondering about life when they're in eighth grade, get them committed and get them on this track for amazing success?
That's a great question. When I meet with our eighth grade parents, one of the things that I felt really I could contribute coming into my tenure was to really build a relationship with parents in a unique way and make them partners in this. And so I have sort of a mandatory informed shopper meeting, because when I say, your life is now going to change. Because now what's happened, of course, with the academic success, now we have students, now people Google, best high school in Arizona, and they come, our name comes up. And so I'll get parents who call me, and the call usually goes like this: oh, my student's a straight A student, and they're really smart, and they really need to go to your school. And I said, you Googled, didn't you? And they get a little quiet, and they laugh a little bit, and they go, yeah. I said, well, that's okay. We want parents to be looking for the best possibilities for their children. And I'm proud that we're a public school. We are not a charter school. We're not a private school. There's no tuition. And our district was at the forefront of understanding how to think about schooling differently in a public instruction environment. And so in that informed shopping experience, the one statistic that I'm most proud of is exactly what you're saying. Not only is your student going to go to college because, it's called University High School for an idea. And we don't care if they go to, we just want them to go to some post-secondary experience. I've had students who go on missions. I had one student who went into the seminary who were really excited about. We promote all of our community colleges as well, because it really is about what's best for the student at that time. And then we have students who are at Stanford. We just had 2 of our students just recently be accepted into Stanford, and one of them was a Questbridge placement, which means she gets to go for free. So those are all really exciting. But what's really important to know is that in our statistics, when you look at the average freshman in college at a 4-year university, the retention rate is somewhere between, 55, 60% of those students stay into their sophomore year at a 4-year university. They may leave and come back, but like to stay and actually start their sophomore year. It's a percentage that's good, but we know that it can be better. Our students are at 96, 98%. And what it is that they have, their executive function has been put on hyperdrive. We know that our executive function, that ability to prioritize and understand how to manage stress in a way that's purposeful, that, comes from life experiences, and your brain is developing along with that. At 24, it's, we think it's pretty much fully developed for executive function development. And we're asking kids to get in, really dig in deep way beforehand. So when our students go off to college, they don't have to weigh, what does it mean for me to not do this assignment right now, because they already know what the consequences are. And when you think about rigor and what you think rigor is, and if you've had a student who we say, oh, you're so smart, and they get straight A's, and Carolyn Dweck, again, her research, the worst thing we can say to kids is you're so smart. You want to praise them for working hard. kids' identities are completely annihilated within the first 2 weeks at University High as freshmen because they may not be an athlete, they may not be an artist, they may not be a lot of different things, but they all are students. They all know what it means to be a student. And within 2 weeks, that is all undercut because for them, being a student means I could do my work on the way to school on the school bus. I can, not do all 10 problems because you know what? My teacher likes me and I can get 8 of them done and I still get the high grade. And we really have to shift their experience. So you have to have a paradigm shift. Your experiences have to change. You have to have some consequences for behavior, positive and negative, in order to have a paradigm shift. And so if they're never experiencing what it means to say, life doesn't mean you can just pick and choose 8 to 10. So that's really hard for them to understand when they're not getting 100%, when they get a 0, in fact, on a homework assignment. And then getting them to see, guess what, but you didn't die, and how you pick yourself back up and you get up and get after it, as we kind of say. So that's the very unique part of it. And then because we are blessed to be a school within a school, we work very closely as teams with grade level and across content within the department. We're building and shifting curriculum all the time within the needs of our students. So it's very organic. They were doing PLCs long before the PLC work came out with DeFore in any kind of published way. So it's just a really strong infrastructure, but it's really, really hard. It's very demanding for everybody involved.
I think that's a key factor that people underestimate, that innovation is really hard. Our shift right now to active learning remotely is really hard. I think sometimes for it to be a success, it takes a certain kind of educator. And I wonder too, I think sometimes it takes somebody that's been disenchanted in another system that's like, no, I want it this way and I'm going to work that crazy hard to make it happen. Is disenchantment at all a piece of your story?
Oh, my story? That's funny. Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say disenchanted. I was called to this profession. Literally, I had gone into college undecided because I had thought, and this is ironic, I tell my students this, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be an environmental lawyer, which was interesting to be a graduate in 1986 and then want to be an environmental law. I'm not sure where that came from, but then I had a misstep where I thought I had to go to business school to go to law school. And then to be in business school, you had to take calculus. I was like, well, I don't do math. So I guess I can't be a lawyer. And I actually lost a scholarship because I had figured that out right before I walked into an interview for a major scholarship. And it was so annihilating to me. I was just disheveled. I stumbled on everything that was being asked of me. And so I went undecided. And I really was literally woken up at 3:00 in the morning from a voice that was very loud. And it said to me, be a teacher, be a teacher. And I said, okay, I'll be a teacher. So, what didn't I screw up too bad in high school? What was I okay at in high school? And I really loved history. I said, you know what? I'll be a history teacher. And I went to bed and changed my major the next morning. And then I was on my way. And when I got my job, initially, interestingly enough, my first teaching job was at Tolleson High School. University High didn't exist at the time. They offered me to teach theater. They said, well, we like this, we really need a theater teacher. And I said, well, I was in a play once. I just really wanted to be a teacher. That's all I wanted to do. And I didn't coach anything. So sometimes being a social studies teacher back in those days, it was difficult to get those jobs if you didn't coach. And I said, well, yeah, I'll do theater. And I did history on site. And I thought I'd do this theater thing for a little while. And then they would eventually just have me as a history teacher. And I tell you all this just to say that I picked up my stuff, packed up to come back from Tempe back to the West Valley. And I found a journal from a dance class that I had taken my senior year in high school. I never saw it while I was in college. Didn't even know I had it. And our dance teacher asked us, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I must have just had that experience where I blew that scholarship. And I said, I don't know where I'm going to see myself in 5 years, but I know the one thing I'd most want to be that I know I could never be is a teacher or an actor. And it was riveting to me. And I packed up that journal. I know, spooky, huh? I packed that journal up. I never saw it again. So I feel
it served its purpose.
It did. And I feel like I have always been called to do this work. I joke. I never had children of my own. I've been raising people's teenagers for the last 30 years. So I don't know if you could do this work with the kind of passion that has driven me if you don't wake up every morning and at some point be frustrated with the current system at some level, at some point in the day. Some days are way better than others. But I don't, any artist, any athlete, you're always looking for a better performance. And when you're working in a system such as education that has all of its entanglements and challenges and inspirations and heartbreaks, I could never consider just being okay with the status quo. And that's probably why oftentimes I found myself on different journeys to try and infiltrate the system from a different vantage point to try and improve it. Because my mother always said, leave it better than you found it. And so I don't know if it's disenchantment, but it's definitely, there have been a lot of fetal position cries, definitely, in my career. But at the end of the day, and I always say this to new teachers, get yourself a yearbook. If you're a high school teacher, get yourself a yearbook and make sure you get kids to sign that yearbook, because that will be your therapy that you need when days you want to quit. You just open that yearbook up and you'll remember why you get up every morning and you do what you do. And so it's funny, you should say that. We do have some teachers who have come to us. Sometimes they'll come to us and they'll say, oh, I just want to, I want to teach kids who just want to learn. And they're just, they're going to be easy to teach because they just get up and they want to do the work. And those teachers quickly tap out. They're not prepared for the kind of work that's necessary. If you're going to ask this of kids academically, what's required of you as the teacher to get them there? They don't get there by themselves. We're not just throwing work at them and sitting back with eating bonbons. And so
absolutely.
That's the big key.
I think there's no amazing educational program out there that comes easy. It takes a lot of effort on all parts. One last question for you. There are so many special ingredients in what you have going on at University High. If you could take some of these special ingredients and if you had a magic wand and could change our traditional U.S. high school model, what would you wish for our students?
Oh my gosh, that's a loaded. When you said you didn't give questions ahead of time, you weren't lying. And that is, man, how many times have I thought about the magic wand? I think the first magic wand I would spread across is that all students want to learn. There is not one student who wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I just want to be adults and I don't want to learn. They may end up being adult and not learning, but it's not because they wake up and they want to actively be failures. And so if I could lace the water with that entry point for everyone who is involved in the educational process. And the same thing goes for teachers. Just like we have a bell curve of kids out there, of performance, we have bell curve. And there's certainly teachers who are harmful and need to go. And we know who those are. But it's those gray teachers, those teachers who have lost their way and maybe even thinking they're doing exactly the best that they could be doing. How do we inspire them? I've always said that professional development should serve the soul. We as teachers squeeze out our sponge. If we're doing the right thing, right? We're squeezing our sponge to those kids and filling their little vessels. And then where does our sponge get filled? And it really has to go back to, it's not just the content. We are not content. We are thinkers. We're creative forces. We're empathetic humans. And so how do we inspire the soul of the teacher on a regular basis and engage them philosophically, artistically, intellectually, scientifically? I think there's a reason why STEM is getting so much momentum, but it's kind of thrown to students opposed to let's backing it up and putting it into the teacher programs. You had mentioned that idea of, at one point in a radical moment, because I was frustrated with complacency, I said, you know what, just give me the Teach for America crew. Let me just start a school that's just Teach for America teachers only. Yeah, you get them for 3 years and then they burn up and they go off and they do their other things. But maybe that's what you need to start the fire. I think we've got to think smaller too. I think when you see school districts who are so large and you have campuses that are 3,000 students, when I, as a teacher, said to myself, I don't have 35, a class of 35. I have 35 individuals this period and another 35 individuals this period. And it's my job to know them. Every day I have to wake up and know them as individuals, or I'm not going to teach them. Now, that's a big thing to ask when you have 150 kids on your docket. But you have to have that perspective. But the same has to be true from our educational leaders. When I started working through the system of when they would ask me, well, what are you going to do about teachers? I'm going to do exactly for teachers what I would do for my students. I need to know my teachers. I need to know them as human beings. Otherwise, I cannot inspire them to be their very best selves. That's what I would want to do is inspire first, fascinate first, and the teaching will come. You'll learn how to write a lesson plan. You'll learn how to align your objectives, how to backward map, all that really important pedagogy so that we're really building the thinking skills appropriately and we're assessing and then drawing our lesson planning from that assessing. But you gotta fascinate first, kids. We're in a whole new world. Why should I sit in your classroom because I'm required to, and it's just my expectation that I'm going to learn from you? So if we're going to stay in big comprehensive worlds and we can't hone it down to a smaller environment like a university high where we can have opportunities for kids to work in smaller, and this is, the pendulum switch always swings. We have that, the back in the day in the 70s where they had like pods, so they had the big high school, but then inside you had the little pods. But I think we could go back to that now because we have better pedagogy, but none of it matters if we don't fascinate first. That's our prime directive. That's what education used to be when it was a privilege and not a requirement. So I don't know.
Wow. I think you're nailing it. What we need for our students, what we need for our teachers. Yes. I want your magic wand all over the place. It's amazing.
Well, thanks.
Yes. And Susan, thank you so much for sharing with your kids. I have that strong sense of familia. I'm going to add the link to the video into my show notes because the students, they were obviously all engaged. Your team has created magic and are really working hard for these kids to change the trajectory, the statistics for our high school kids into something wildly successful. So thank you. And thank you for sharing with our listeners today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope I didn't rattle on too much. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's important that us educational geeks be heard.
Thanks. Okay. You have a great day.
All right. You too. Thanks so much, Maureen.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Susan is definitely inspirational. She's finishing up her education career this spring, so I'm really happy that we had a chance to talk before she retires. I wanted to highlight one resource that Susan mentioned a couple of times, and that is Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. There's evidence out there that we can keep growing and keep learning our entire lives. And there's also a lot of research about how teachers and their practices have a huge impact on the mindsets of students. So with that growth mindset that they have at University High, there's more motivation, there's more achievement. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy, and it just keeps getting better and better. So I will put information on Carol Dweck and her work in the show notes. When Susan talks about recharging our teachers' batteries, I love the idea of it coming through professional development. And within the school, there's also a really good resource at large, and that is Angela Watson's Cornerstone for Teachers. And that includes a wonderful podcast, Truth for Teachers. Those give a lot of resources on the work-life balance and how not to become all-consumed as a teacher. I was also really impressed with Susan's closing wish for education. And since she had so much to share, I'm just going to synthesize her 4 points. She talked about helping students have ganas, having that desire, and by doing that with vision and purpose. She talked about refilling our teachers, their sponges, and students really do squeeze out so much of their energy. How can we use professional development? What resources do we have in place? What can we add so that teachers get replenished? We know a lot of teachers leave the profession because they are just burnt out and not feeling like there was a way to recharge their batteries. So as a culture, we need to find ways to help our teachers be replenished and stay with this very, very important vocation. She also mentioned smaller. Yeah, it has been tried in the past with pods, and sometimes things worked and they didn't. We know so much more about pedagogy, how students learn, behavior, all kinds of things. Smaller means what her school calls familia. There's a strong sense of family and 30 individuals in her class, and now each teacher that she knows. It's not assembly line. It's not impersonal. Smaller is what it takes to get to that level of relationship most of the time. And then I'm just going to challenge us in closing. How can we, in our classes, in our homes, in our lives, do as Susan suggests and start with fascination? Thank you, Education Evolution podcast listeners. Have a great rest of your day. This is Maureen O'Shaughnessy signing off. Thanks again for listening. To support the Education Evolution, subscribe so it lands in your podcast app and gets out to more decision makers. Then rate and review it. For more information and show notes, go to educationevolution.org. Education Evolution listeners, you are the ones to ensure we create classrooms where each student is seen, heard, valued, and thriving. We are in this together, and we need you. Let's go out and reach every student today. Thank you for listening. Signing off, I am Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your partner in boldly reimagining education.